Hey, welcome everybody and happy Enlightenment Day. Some of us here have been sitting since Wednesday meditation. I'm not one of them. But this guy over here is, and who else was here since then? Shoju and Yupin and George, man, and Brian. Yeah, so congratulations. This is the close of our session commemorating the enlightenment of the Buddha. And so this talk is about it includes about the enlightenment of the Buddha, but also it's part two of a talk that I gave previously on the idea of lineage in Zen. So when we think of the Buddha's enlightenment, one of the things to consider is that we don't aspire to become the Buddha. Actually, we aspire to become ourselves. So we're not here to become something that the Buddha was. We're here to manifest our own deepest aspirations for awakening. And that's going to look different. It's going to look different for each one of us. Your awakening is not the same as the Buddha's. It's not the same as mine. It's your unique awakening. And that's what we're celebrating here today. It's that each of us has the ability to awaken. And there's no cookie cutter experience for that. Isn't that fantastic? Yay, right? Yeah, now, we might think that awakening is a purely personal endeavor. But that's not the case either. The practice needs to be more than just personal. We come here, all of us, I presume, for some personal reasons, and that's totally legit. But for the practice to really blossom and move beyond the personal is essential for our own development, our own manifestation of enlightenment. It has to go beyond the personal. It has to go beyond personal reasons. The Buddha, before he was considered Buddha, awakened, he said, I'm doing this. Before he was even awakened, he said, I'm doing this for everybody. I'm leaving home. I'm giving up my earthly home. I'm giving up my kingdom, my power, so that I can end the suffering, not just my own, but for everybody. And that was prior to his awakening. And in the Zen tradition, we recite one of the four great vows: beings are numberless, I vow to free them all. So our awakening needs to be, our practice, let's just talk about our practice in general. It's fine to come for personal reasons, and it has to be bigger than the personal for it to really take hold and flower. So the question that I'd like to raise, and I continue to raise, is what does that look like for you? Again, that's going to be your awakening. Like, what does your unique awakening look like? It's not just to address the psychological needs. That's a big reason for a lot of people coming, and it might include psychological stuff. It might include the idea of a mindfulness and attention to things. But it has to be bigger than that. It's got to have more than that. And if we look at the enlightenment stories of the Buddha, we've been looking at these over the past few days, and this is also connected to Zen lineage. We chant these ancestors' names in some Zen training centers every day, from the Buddha all the way up to the present teacher. And if we look at these traditional stories of enlightenment, the Buddhas, and then comes Mahakashapa. We looked at the Buddhas on Wednesday, and Mahakashapas on Thursday, and Anandas on Friday, or no, Saturday. No, I got that wrong. Anyways, we looked at those guys awakening, and if a kind of initial glance at it it seems like some kind of a special interaction between the teacher and the student that's highly privatized and that we don't have access to. But if you look closer at the lives of these people, some of them were real people and some of them were probably not. But if we start to look at some of their lives, get a sense of what they were about, we can see that their lives encompass much more than just some kind of an inner insight, or like an internal transformation. It was much bigger than that. Otherwise, how could the Buddha have attracted so many followers in his lifetime and made a whole movement? So if we just look at the Buddha's life specifically, he was also addressing needs of his time. He lived in a society that was highly stratified, there was a caste system firmly in place. And if he were to follow that system, he would have maintained his role as a warrior. That was the caste that he was born into. And that's what his father wanted him to be. And for him, it was a huge shift. It rocked their world for him to become basically a Brahmin or a home leaver. That's not something you did in that society if you were born into that caste. And also, he allowed people from the untouchable, that wasn't even considered part of the caste, the untouchables in that society, to come into his community, which was also, you didn't do that. You didn't allow people from a different caste to, they didn't congregate like that. And then if we look at his lifetime teaching, thanks to the third teacher in our lineage, Ananda, he allowed women to enter the monastic community, which was also a big deal. So Ananda, his cousin, whom we talked about yesterday a little bit, is thanks to him, thanks to the Buddha's aunt, who was also his foster mother, thank you. And Mahapajapati talked to Ananda and said, hey, Ananda, tell Buddha we want to be part of your Sangha. And she wasn't saying that, we can look at the aspirations for enlightenment behind that, but also look at the social context. The Buddha, he was supposed to be the prince. They didn't have somebody to succeed him, the kingdom of Magadha. He was the one. And so his whole family, they were depending on him. They become, so many of his retinue as a prince, they followed him, including his stepmother or his aunt, Mahapajapati. She was the first nun. His wife became a nun. His son became a monk. And cousins and all this, they all followed him because he was their leader. And whether he was going to be that as a king or a recluse, it didn't seem to make a difference to them. But he allowed the females into the community, which was a big shift for that society as well. So we can see he addressed the social dilemmas. What social issues do we have in our culture that need to be addressed? Is a question that can help to stimulate our reasons for being here. We're not always aware of those reasons. We might be more aware of the personal because they're so much closer. But if we start to scratch the surface a little bit more, we can see there's other issues too. Maybe we're not totally conscious or aware of them. But we can look to some of these ancestral teachers for guidance on how they did it. And I want to just mention my own teacher, Diane Banaj, because she, it's thanks for her conscious awareness of why she entered this path to become a Buddhist nun. that gave me inspiration. I wasn't totally clear myself why I was doing it. I had some ideas. But when I heard her stories, I thought, oh yeah, okay. Yeah, there's something more than just personal for me here. There's something bigger here. And for her, for example, I mean, there were several reasons, but one of them that I can think of is the Vietnam War. That was the era in which she grew up, and she had lost a good friend to the war. And for her, she felt that she had been betrayed by her country. And at that time in American history, a lot of people felt that way. If you think about the 60s and 70s and kind of the sentiments at that time. And a lot of Buddhist priests, Westerners, came to Buddhism through that doorway of the Vietnam War. And if I look at her teacher, his reasons for doing this path, well, I can't say I know them fully, but I know that he thought that he had killed somebody through his acupuncture practice. He thought he had accidentally killed somebody. And so as a means to repent for what he had done, he entered the path. So one of the things my teacher said is that there's three doorways to practice. One is repentance, that we've done something that we regret. And it's helpful to keep those regrets in mind. It's not about shaming ourselves or feeling guilty about what we did in the past. We don't have to go there. But our regrets can motivate us to practice more deeply. Going back to a Vietnam War vet, a man named Claude Anchin Thomas. I don't know, maybe some of you have heard of him. But many years ago, he was a Vietnam vet, and he was in the unfortunate position of having to kill children when he was there. Not totally, I think it was an accident anyways, but he felt such remorse about it, and went to Thich Nhat Hanh because of that. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, well, there's still plenty of children living that you can help to take care of. So we can look at the past, the things that we've done that we regret, as a guideline for what direction we want to go in the future. That can be a guidepost for us. Noda Daito Roshi, my teacher's teacher, my grandfather teacher, he made a temple in Japan, which was very extraordinary for his particular time, partly because most of the temples had been built over 1,000 years ago, right? So he was building a new temple. That doesn't happen in Japan these days, and he got some big award from Eiheiji for doing that. But connected to the temple, and this is somewhat usual. Well, I don't know usual, but some Buddhist temples have schools connected to their temples, and his school was for students who couldn't make it in mainstream public schools in Japan. There were students that were bullied. So he was addressing a legitimate social issue that was a problem in Japan. His teacher, Daishun Shimbi, another piece of the lineage, he was an orphan. He was born in, he didn't have parents, and he was taken in by his teacher and brought up in the temple. So that must have had a huge influence on why he decided to do what he did. So we can look at these kinds of issues in the past to help inspire us. What do we see that's wrong with the society that we live in? And Nebraska Zen Center is not here to change our larger society, but we are here to help people to grow their aspiration, whatever that is, their aspiration for enlightenment, and whatever that might look like for you. How do you want to make this world, this society, a better place? And the only way we know that is if we're acknowledge the things that aren't going well in it. There's things that are going well, and there's things that aren't going well. And each of us has a unique take on that. And so how do we address those ills? All right. Here at Nebraska Zen Center, I like to think one of the ways that we do that is by being opening and welcoming to everybody. Not everybody finds a spiritual home in their root traditions. And so this is a place for anybody who feels ostracized, left out in some way, to be here and feel at home. We're not limiting who comes. And we're not judging you for who you are, your beliefs, your practices, your persuasions, etc. We're not judging any of that stuff. Anybody is capable of awakening. Absolutely. That's the Buddha's teaching. That's the foundational assumption, is that all of us, regardless of what we've done in the past, regardless of any guilt or shame trips we place on ourselves, every single one of us is capable of awakening. And this also includes, when we think of enlightenment, we think, I'm going to do this good thing. But we also need to embrace the darkness, the dark parts of ourself, the things that put us down, the things that create, or the things that when we feel anxiety, when we feel depression, when we feel like we can't go on, that is also part of our practice. It doesn't mean we're a failure. It doesn't mean we're a failure. If we feel anxiety, we're sitting zazen, I'm really anxious, this practice doesn't work. No, it's okay. It's okay. Make your practice bigger. That's what my teacher would say. We need to learn the ABCs. A, bigger container. ABC, this is a practice. We make our practice into a bigger container so that we can allow everybody and everything in every state of mind. There's not some special enlightenment state that we're after. So that's the thing about these stories of enlightenment. It gives you the impression that there's some kind of enlightened state that we're after, and that's couldn't be farther from the truth. At least in the Soto tradition, it's all encompassing. And that's why Dogen says practice is not dependent on sitting or lying down. Right? It's not, our whole life is practice. Our whole life is zazen, whether we're sitting or standing or walking or lying down. Whatever state of mind we happen to have at the moment, all of that is okay. Right? Even our addictive tendencies. Our job is just to make a big mirror. We're just looking in the mirror. And the mirror isn't judging. It's just reflecting. It's just taking there whatever's in there. Whatever's there is okay. And so part of the practice is to take a critical look at ourselves in a loving way. Again, it's not to shame ourselves. And to take also a critical look at our tradition. And for example, people find a home here in Buddhism, but that's not always the case of Buddhism around the world. I'm thinking of a place like Myanmar. The problem there is that Buddhism and the state, the government, are so connected, so deeply intertwined, that Buddhists are actually persecuting minority religions in that country. That's not what we want either. We don't want to make everybody into Buddhists. That's not our call. That's not our mission. We do want to help with the relief of suffering, right? One person said, be a Buddha, not a Buddhist. Don't be a Buddhist, be a Buddha, right? Don't focus on trying to convert everybody into your way of thinking. Do what, as my teacher would say, do what needs to be done here and now in the Dharma. What needs to be done in your life, right? And if you come to the Zen Center, you get to practice that. Like, I've just been so inspired just being here this weekend and this morning seeing everybody cleaning the dishes together. That's our practice. We get into the kitchen and everybody's working in harmony. We're not thinking about what I'm supposed to be doing. We're just doing it. We're just wiping the dishes, and everybody's in harmony, and there's a beauty in working together like that. Oh, this person doesn't know what to do. I'll give them a dish to dry. right? Okay, get the broom, let's sweep the floor. And there's this wonderful harmony that takes place. And that, man, that's stellar. That you don't have to convince somebody that they belong. They belong because they've got a broom in their hand. They got a washcloth in their hand. You know, you belong because you got eyes to see and ears to hear, and you have a breath that moves. All right. So I want to look at, so continue with this idea of lineage where I left off last time. We could potentially broaden or widen. I want to talk about lineage specifically in another talk about particular teachers in my own lineage, but I want to provide a larger context for the idea of lineage here. And so for this talk, I want to talk about how we can subdivide lineage into three parts: our blood ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, and then our non-human ancestors. So last talk I talked a bit about our blood ancestors, and this time I want to kind of open that up a little bit wider. And one of the places I find really helpful is in a ceremony that's done by Thich Nhat Hanh called the Three Earth Touchings, where the community will touch the earth, bow their head to the ground, and the leader of that ceremony will then recite the earth, these three earth touchings. I'm just going to offer the first two because they're the ones that connect us with our blood ancestors, spiritual ancestors, and non-human ancestors. So I'll just read this to you, keeping in mind that this is a ceremony and that tradition, like for that tradition, they're bowing and taking this in. But touching the earth, this is the number one. Touching the earth, I connect with ancestors and descendants of both my spiritual and my blood families. So this first earth touching is for both the family, your blood family, and your spiritual family. Again, keeping in mind here, when we connect with ancestors, the ancestral teachers, the ancestors of our blood lineage, it's in order to ground us and to give us a vision, a sense of where we need to go, based both on what they've done that is good and what they've done that is not so good, assuming that we want to move in the direction that they did that was good and not move in the direction that they went in that was not so good. Not to shame anybody, right? But just to know, okay, this is part of my inheritance. I want to go, it's like pruning a tree, right? You want to cultivate the branches that are going to be most viable so that the fruit comes out. And, right? Okay, so number one, touching the earth, I connect with ancestors and descendants of both my spiritual and my blood families. All right, and then it continues. My spiritual ancestors include the Buddha, the Bodhisattvas, the noble Sangha, right, the community. And then you can add in there other spiritual ancestors of your own, right? If you live in the United States, most of us have the spiritual ancestor you can consider from the Christian tradition. Those are also our spiritual ancestors. So just pause for a second before you come down on that one side or the other. Hear me out. And my own spiritual teachers still alive already passed away. So our spiritual ancestors could be anybody who we find we have gone to for some help, support, refuge. They are present in me because they have transmitted to me seeds of peace, wisdom, love, and happiness. They have woken up in me my resource of understanding and compassion, When I look at my spiritual ancestors, I see those who are perfect in the practice of the mindfulness trainings, understanding, and compassion, and those who are still imperfect. Right? So it's recognizing, okay, my spiritual ancestors, first of all, some of them are stellar, and some of them have work to be done. They're not there yet. They're all a part of me. So acknowledging, okay, I got this as part of me too. I accept them all because I see within myself shortcomings and weaknesses. All right? So that's our practice, noticing our own shortcomings and weaknesses, but not getting too bogged down in them. Now, you don't have to worry too much about them. Aware that my practice of the mindfulness trainings is not always perfect. Right? We make mistakes. And that I am not always as understanding and compassionate as I would like to be. I open my heart and accept all my spiritual descendants. Right? Just as you fall short, just as I fall short in my own aspirations, right? So too my spiritual ancestors have fallen short. But it also, the purpose here is to encourage us to not give up just because we fall short or have made mistakes in the past, right? Keep going. Some of my descendants practice the mindfulness trainings, understanding and compassion, and in a way which invites confidence and respect. But there are also those who come across many difficulties and are constantly subject to ups and downs in their practice. Right? So this is to help us to get a critical view of our spirit ancestors. And I think also of people like Nonin or Kyoki, who were people that are founding of this temple here. And we say their names in the ceremonies, but we have to keep in mind that they were not perfect. And it's thanks to their imperfection that we can do this practice too. And we can make up for where they weren't perfect. We can do it for them. That's our, and in some sense, that's our calling. I mean, you could take it up as that. That was one of the biggest things that I gained from living with my teacher for 15 years, waking up pretty much almost every day and sitting with her in the Zendo, eating with her, washing the floors, doing the gardening, taking her to the airport, taking her to retreats, helping her in different ways, is that I got to see I got to see how she actually lived her life. Because when I first met her, all I knew was that she could sit impeccably. She could do zazen impeccably. And I felt so attracted to whatever it is she was emanating. And I wanted to be that. But I didn't know how to do that outside of that particular context. So I wanted to go and be with her and be like, well, how does she do this beyond just sitting? Because most of us, we're going to leave here, we're not going to be sitting all day, right? Including myself. We have families to go back to, we've got a job to attend to, we're going to be meeting strangers, we're going to be with non-Buddhists, So how do you work with various diversities in your life? And I got to witness her, both the things that she did that were really stellar, as well as the mistakes that she made. And to me, watching her make mistakes was so helpful. That was a huge part of my education, because I realized, well, first of all, I don't need to do it like that. I won't do it like that when it's my turn. That was a big gift for me to see that. Okay, and the other thing is that she made mistakes. She wasn't perfect, and that means that your hang-ups, your insecurities, that's not a reason to stop this practice. That's not the reason. Do it. Keep doing it. You got your strengths too, and we gotta focus on those. And then he says, in the same way, I accept all my ancestors on my mother's side and my father's side of the family. I accept all their good qualities and their virtuous actions, and I also accept all their weaknesses. I open my heart and accept all my blood descendants with their good qualities, their talents, and also their weaknesses. This is this could be potentially very transformational for any of us. We start to think about our blood family. And especially if you have a family, there's lots of feuding, or there's been bad blood here and there. And we tend to, like magnets to the bad stuff, right? Was the neuroscientist says, what's his name? Rick Hansen, Dr. Hansen, he says our minds are like magnets to negative and like Teflon to the positive. Right? And in practice, what we're doing is reversing that. We got to make our minds like Teflon to the negative and magnets to the positive. So what? Your parents, they weren't good for you? All right, well, find the other ones that were. You're alive. Something must have been good about your descendants to make you, you're here. You found the Dharma. You know that the Dharma is good. And the only way you could know that it's good is because you know deep inside you something that's powerful and loving and caring and compassionate, forgiving. Right? Persistence, you have that in you, and that was from your ancestors somewhere down the line, even if you don't know who they were or what they did. So know that. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, if you're sick, we have relatives in us that lived into their 90s. Maybe they lived to be centennials. You have those genes in you too, and focus your mind on those genes that are in you. And if you're sick, you can work on that healing that part of yourself. Right? So if we focus too much on the aspects that are negative, we're going to start to embody that. Just as so, shifting the awareness to the ones that did well, but not forgetting the ones that had troubles. Right? We can develop compassion there. That's where the compassion comes in. All right. My spiritual ancestors, blood ancestors, spiritual descendants, and blood descendants are all part of me. So that's the other piece. When we look back, we can see our ancestors, but it's not just to look back, it's also to know there's a future ahead of us. And how we are in the future, how we are now is going to, it's going to have an effect on the future. Our children, our nephews and nieces, our family members, they're going to see us, and they're going to see us as an example. We're going to be either good examples or bad examples. You decide. I mean, if we're conscious, then we can be good examples if we make a conscious effort. If we remain unconscious, unmindful, we just lapse into whatever is the easiest path. Whatever we are, we set an example for the future generations. And it's even beyond our doing. People, like my teacher would say, people learn from our backs. So even if you don't say the right thing, or even if you say the right thing, if your actions are different, your backside is communicating too. In other words, we communicate who we are by our actions, not just by our words, not just by our words. So we do this practice for the future generations as well. It could be family, but it could be people who are, if you're a teacher, then you got a lot of students in your class. They're learning from you too. I learned this the hard way, teaching at a 5th grade elementary school. These kids, I was trying to teach them to behave. That was a big mistake. They taught me to behave. And moreover, actually, I was teaching them how to yell at each other. Because that's how I was with them. I look back at that and I think, I really screwed that up. That was my mistake. And it's helpful for me now. I mean, now I teach at a community college, and I caught myself last month yelling at a student because they were texting in the class and they came in late at the same time. And just my fury went through the roof on that in that moment. People, you guys can understand that, but it's not my aspiration. I didn't live up to my highest aspiration in that moment. And I remembered back to those kids that I just had such a hard time with in that 5th grade class. I remembered back and said, wait a minute, no, that's not. There's a better way here. There's a better way. I can do better. We make mistakes. I make mistakes. We make mistakes, and we keep going. And we find what's our highest aspiration? What's the example we want to be for our children and for whoever we're in contact with? Because they'll learn more from those actions that we make than anything that we tell them. And that's what I learned from those fifth graders. They didn't learn, they weren't interested in how much I knew. They wanted to know if I loved them or not. They wanted to know if I cared about them. And I had to show them that, right? And that's how you got to put down the agendas, right? Even our aspirations, we got to put down our aspirations and show people that we love them, show them that we're kind, not just through words, but through our actions. And that's where the practice really, that's where the rubber meets the road. How do we do that? That's our real koan. Don't get caught up in the koan of what's the sound of one hand clapping. What's the sound of a tree if there's nobody that falls down in a forest, if nobody's there to hear? Those aren't the koans we need to get enwrapped in. The koans, really, how do we become kinder person in the people that we're in relationship with? That's the real koan, right? That's the issue. And that's what we got to just keep that in the fore. There's going to be people we don't like. There's going to be people that we find ourselves hating. That's where the practice comes in. May they be well. May they be peaceful. Start thinking about those people with kind thoughts, right? Or maybe just don't think about them. If you can't think of, right? Your mom used to say, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. If you don't have anything nice to think, don't think anything. If you can't think nice, don't think. But if you can, then start thinking loving thoughts. Not easy. I mean, I say that, right? I say it, but it's a practice. It's really a practice. And then to manifest that in real time, when they're there, when you have to deal with them, that's where the practice is. That's where the koan is. All right. The second earth touching. So this, again, coming back to this idea of lineage, I connect with all people and all species that are alive at this moment in this world with me. I am one with the wonderful pattern of life that radiates out in all directions. I see the close connection between myself and others, how we share happiness and suffering. I am one with those who were born. Wow. Every time I read this, I'm just like, First of all, we're human beings. First of all, we got arms and legs. On a most basic foundational level, we are related, right? Our ears are on the side of our face, not up here. Our eyes are right here. That's what Dogen said. He came back from China. He said, "What did you bring?" They wanted to know, "What did you bring? What was the sutras? What's the esoteric teachings that you brought?" And he said, "Here it is. You ready? My nose is vertical. My eyes are horizontal." Wow. That's Zen, right? It's no special thing. It's no special thing. It's real bland like that. But so as humans, of course, that's the most obvious. We're related beyond blood to each other. That's the most obvious. I'll let you guys read this here because this is just it's kind of heavy actually. But yeah. I am the frog swimming in the pond, and I'm also the snake who needs the body of the frog to nourish its own body. I'm the caterpillar or the ant. I'm the caterpillar or the ant that the bird is looking for to eat. I am also the bird that is looking for the caterpillar or the ant. Right? So he goes on here, but the basic import is that the species of the earth and ourself are not, they are also part of our ancestry. And we can look to science actually here to verify this empirically. That's the gift of modern times, that we can see our ancestry. I mean, we can start from the present moment and look backwards, or we can start from the distant past and go forward. Either way, it's amazing, right? If you look at, if we start in the present and go backwards, we can see our ancestry connected to apes, chimpanzees. I mean, we share over 98% of our DNA with chimps. That's amazing. That's an amazing connection right there. And their eyes are also horizontal and their nose is vertical. The lizards too. Their eyes are horizontal, but they have look what happened to the face, right? The eyes are here. In some of these amphibians, lizards, their eyes are here. And somehow life moves them forward through the human being. Or their hands. If you look at the skeleton of a bat at the Smithsonian, I saw this a couple years ago at the Smithsonian in DC. They had these bat skeletons, and I was just amazed. They look like just overgrown human arms and hands. The wings of the birds, right, or the bats, their hands were just their whole, there was like just elongated hands with webs. I mean, it doesn't take much to make associations with that. This knowledge is a reason not to shame ourselves, but to celebrate, right? We can celebrate those similarities. The Buddha didn't have the scientific data in front of him. He didn't know about evolution. This is our age to kind of consider that and think about, and even dare say, celebrate this. And it's hard to do because we have this tradition that says we're somehow, this philosophical tradition, that somehow we're above and beyond animals, right? We think we're somehow better than them. Humans were made in God's image. Animals, not so much. It's the humans that go to heaven, animals not. That's the kind of the philosophical tradition that we've inherited. And so when we start to look at these ideas that come out of science, we might have some hesitation there. And it's okay. Part of the problem is also scientists present it like it's not something amazing. They present it like it's some sticking your nose in dirt. Right? That's not what we want either. We want to lift this up. And as a chaplain, I minister to a lot of Christians, and I've had to figure out, how do I work this in? Because I have a particular spiritual orientation, and it's a lot of fun for me, this job, because I go in incognito. I'm not wearing my robes. I'm not presenting myself as a Buddhist, and yet I'm ministering to a lot of Christians, and some of them are fundamentalists, right? So I got to speak their language. And I found some wonderful things in their own tradition that are amazing. And I should say it's really our tradition, because if you're in the United States, you can't help but have some affiliation with Christianity. But there's stuff in there that's, on a surface, just not even surface, deep level. Psalm 139, check it out. Check it out for yourself. It talks about being formed from the heart of the earth. That each of us, human beings, came out of it doesn't say use the word mantle, but you can imagine that. We come out of the mantle of the earth. That's amazing. That's meant to be celebrated. And in the book of Genesis, it talks about us coming from dirt, from dust. That's meant to be celebrated. That's meant to be, we got to lift up the dirt. Those are our ancestors. That's where we come from. Take a spoonful of dirt outside of the Zen Center, or even the ash that's in the incense holder, and look at it. Those are our ancestors. That's also where our life comes from, right? It's there. All those little microorganisms in a teaspoon of dirt, billions of microorganisms there, and somehow that evolved into bats and humans. wow, and all the different diversity that's around us. So this is this is a celebration. It's a celebration of our life. And that's, to me, that's why I resonate with the Buddha's enlightenment. Is it's not about what he saw, it's about what we see, right? It's about what you see. It's about how I celebrate life, being alive, the gift of life, right? How do you do that? We can look to the Buddha as an example of how he did it, but it's not enough. We got to find that within ourselves, and that requires us each to dig into our own aspirations, our own birthright, why we're here. Right? And each of us has that aspiration in us. But it might take some zazen, right, to look at that, to break it open, and hanging out with Dharma friends. Hang out with Dharma friends so you get clear about what's important to you and how you want to manifest enlightenment in your own life. Right? All right. All right, I believe in you. We can do it together, though. We do it together. It's not by ourselves. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,